Hello, internet friends, and welcome to Keep the Game Moving. And this time, I am so excited to be joined by Honey. If you don't know Honey, she is an awesome presence. She's a GM of Clockwork Vines and a bunch of other things streaming. She runs games all over the place. She's a wonderful presence on social media. And we're going to talk some. She also, I think you're the creator of Embrace the Initiative. Yeah, which we'll talk about later, but is something that I think is wonderful. So, Honey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited for this. So, how did you get your start GMing?
I have been informally GMing since I was about 4 or 5 and didn't know how to play pretend correctly. I didn't know that there wasn't supposed to be a setting, world building, and so on because, again, I love to read. It was about 11 or 12 when I saw that there were actually systems out there that could create boundaries that weren't just me saying that does not make sense thematically. And people could roll dice and have character sheets. I was swept up in that internet world when it became big to start RPing and running games and so on through digital means. Made a lot of connections in the community that way, and sort of straddled with a foot in each world. Um, I didn't start as an adult though, like I went on my teens and so until someone actually plays online and was curious about how do you play this, and I offered to teach a group of people. And at the same time, they were letting me know about these actual plays and these shows, some big franchise ones now. And I just made my little Twitter account so it could just be for gaming, just Honey and Dice. And the TTRPG world and GMing for tables of people sucked me in. I've been there ever since.
I forgot that you made dice. Like that was something else you like
I
had
don't.
a
I don't. Oh, I don't make dice. I
right.
just love.
Well, it looks like we might be having more internet issues here.
Sugar and spice, and I just did honey and dice.
Right. uh, that works out well. I want to apologize. We're having a few internet issues, but we're going to work through it. We'll get it all figured out. Every once in a while, one of us might just have the same expression on our face for a while, and you know, we'll. The internet is an angry beast today, and we accept that. So I mentioned that you run Clockwork Vines, which was a 6 episode. How many episodes?
It's 2 seasons,
Yeah.
and the first season had 2 separate tables, and the first one only had one collaborative table. But each season ran about 6 or 7 episodes.
And so that is one interesting aspect of that, the whole sort of different tables kind of part of that, which I think is really neat. But it is a story of your creating, and it is a really, I think, unique take on the sort of Cthulhu tropes and Call of Cthulhu world. Tell us a little bit about Clockwork Vines. Walk us through it there.
I was trying to wait till the airplane finished going overhead, but so I have a habit of finding systems I really like that would support stories that I want to tell. And even though I have been a huge fan of Call of Cthulhu, most of KSCM's systems, um, the Victorian language of flowers really called to me. And I was saying, I think I can make an entire storyline around just the language of flowers, what they mean, and build that into a Victorian-esque steampunk like world because there was Cthulhu by Gaslight, and I liked a lot of the source material there. And I just got curious. I said, not that many people would be interested in botanical steampunk. Nobody knows what that is, but let me just put out an invite. Uh, and the application was super flowery. It had like, if you planted seeds in a garden, how would you grow? And I had them rolling stats during the whole application process, and it was almost like mini role play in and of itself. And I got like 16 applications. And I was like, oh my goodness.
I'm gonna have to say no now.
And I didn't want to say no.
Yeah.
That is how I ended up with 2 tables. Um,
And the way you kind of ran the tables separately but kind of together, I thought was really neat, and the interplay possibilities there. Like, was this, so you didn't plan on having the 2 tables until you got so many people? That was just sort of an idea you came up with?
Correct. I had created the world, and in the world, I had like the concept of um, man against technology and the development of technology, and that would be like this city piece. But I had planned for the bulk of the party, and spoiler alert if you've not seen it yet, to be on this train journey to like a farm area and this massive estate with these special gardens, and the whole story was supposed to take place there. um, I got some characters that would make sense to be city based, and shop owners or street urchins and so on. And to be ironic, the story just kind of bloomed from there. I said, simultaneously, both stories are happening at the same time. They have to be happening at the same time. And what one group does will affect the other, and vice versa. Um, and because it was such a daunting idea, I got excited about the challenge, and it ended up working out amazingly.
I thought it was really cool. I've played in a couple of multi-table games. I've only tried it once, and that was at a con. So it was different than kind of doing it on stream. How did you sort of how did you manage the implications of, okay, what happens on table A is going to affect table B? Like, was that just sort of, was there a system to that, or was it kind of just you were reading the beats as you were going?
So, one, it was fortunate that both games happened like one day before the other. So there was like 24-hour period for me to make any adjustments. Um, I am a very fly by the seat of my pants sort of storyteller. So I'm always making last minute changes based on, oh, I didn't know they were going to fight a carrot, or oh, I didn't know they were going to blow up the whole train station. That those are things I have to adjust for.
Anytime you can have somebody fight a carrot. I mean,
So
that's really interesting. So you were essentially kind of improv. You would just sort of take what happened on table A, and that would lead you to the improv for how it affects table B.
correct, and it helped that I started to create like family trees behind all my NPCs, and it was little Easter eggs that some people did pick up on about certain NPCs from 2 different groups would actually be related and connected and so on. And so, somebody might reference, oh, I have an aunt that lives in Alströmeria Alley, not knowing that that NPC would then be called into play later to help the group in Alströmeria Alley because of a message from, the Whisper Gardens group. So, yeah.
Something else that I loved about Clockwork Vines, and I think Gaslight helped with this, but it had a sense of whimsy that I think Call of Cthulhu all too often lacks. There was almost a well, it didn't take itself too seriously, which I think was I loved personally.
I think it also that was heavily influenced by how relaxed everyone at the table was. I had a couple of players that said they called it cozy Cthulhu. Um, because um, we had a character that was a writer, with a character that's a boxer, with a character that's um, a adventurer, Bresk kind of farmhand character, and we had all of these characters for so many diverse backgrounds. Um, and one thing I love about Call of Cthulhu with the investigator approach is you get more of an opportunity to say, how would an actual person thrown into a situation this odd actually respond? And if I'm a single mother just fresh off the farm, thought I was going on a vacation, and now I am fighting, sentient trees, that there is that sense of whimsy created because for that character, for the everyday person, it would be extremely whimsical. Whereas in fantasy laden settings where you've got your hobbits and your elves and so on, whimsy is the norm.
Mm.
So I think that helped a lot.
What did you find were some of the challenges of running two tables?
So, to be honest, I didn't feel like I ran into too many challenges until we went from two tables into one. And that was less about the game running than play and interplay or any challenges that may come from adjusting stories. And that was more just because mid 2020 to all the way now in 2021 was so difficult for so many people that the consistency needed to be playing every week and so on. For me, my players' physical and mental health always comes before the game, so we had a lot of gaps, and I felt a little bit um, not guilty, but I was really empathetic about people having to try to remember what state of mind their characters were in or what happened last time and so on when you've got a couple of weeks between sessions.
Yeah, that's a real thing and not just for the players.
Mhm.
When we're running these games online, we're creating a community, and you feel not just like, oh, we have to skip to, like, for instance, I play in a D&D game. We skipped last night because our DM had to work and life. And oh darn, we're not going to play. But also, on the Discord, people are like, oh no, I'd planned on and you feel like you're letting people down, and it's um it's a thing, and it's okay to acknowledge that that sucks, that, hey, sorry, life happens, and we wish we were playing too, like that's a weird thing that, like, didn't doesn't happen in home games. Like, if my home game skips a week, okay, we'll play next week. But the streaming games, because of that community, which is amazing, that the community is the huge strength of that. But it's also, it can be a challenge when you get stuff like that.
Yeah, and I personally learned that I curate my community so closely that most of the people that end up in it, whether it's my Discord channel or direct email to me and so on, I know everybody. Like, I don't have a public Discord. We're all table mates and so on. Um, I had never created a cancellation policy, and just a set thing to not only set my mind at ease, but also other players at ease, because maybe I care too much. I never want anybody to be left out. But when you do have a table of 9 or 8 people, if 1 or 2 have to be out, you still have a full table.
Yep.
So with everyone's consent and saying, hey, we really do need to put something in place so that if only 1 or 2 people are out and we still have 5 or 6 people, we still will play. We will still be able to take the story a little bit further without anyone being left out. That helped a lot of people relax. Feel a little bit less guilty, but also not feeling like, hey, this whole session has been canceled because of me. And even though nobody ever had any animosity or no one was really irritated or angry, because again, we're such a close community, You really can't help the brain gremlins that start whispering to you about productivity, efficiency, or whether or not your decision has been a burden on the rest of the group.
Yeah, I'm letting people down. I
Mm-hmm.
can't get over that. Uh, I really one of the things I really enjoy about your DMing is I think GMing is you have a really nice sense for camera time
Mm-hmm.
because as you were saying, you were running a big table. Like I personally have real challenge. Like it's a challenge for me to have 8 people at the table,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I don't have a I'm not as good at going like, oh, we haven't heard from player 6 in a while. Let's get them some camera time. But I thought you really did a nice job of that. Do you have any sort of, I mean, is that just a feel you have, or were ways you worked at that?
I always say that every person, every character has a purpose in every session. So ahead of time, I have already created little seeds to stay on theme that have been planted all throughout the different settings or the change of scenery and so on, so that everyone has the opportunity to have a moment, even the characters that are more quiet. Um, Also, in my session 0, I get a feel for people's personalities and their likes and dislikes because some people make the assumption if someone's character didn't get a whole bunch of screen time, so to speak, that they've neglected the character. I've met some players that really enjoy playing the quiet one. They have those moments where they say something and it's the quote of the whole session. But in the background, whether or not people can see it or not, I'm getting messages, my character would like to do this, I'm working on this, and so on. So they are actually contributing to the story, whether or not, if we're doing a streamed game, people hear from them. So as a DM, GM, storyteller, as long as using your safety and communication tools behind the scenes, everyone is contributing, you can start to build that reputation, and your viewers won't feel like, oh, this person is being left out or that person is left out, because hey, we've got 2 scientists and a fighter, and a soldier, and this other person that's going to fight. Well, I know my scientists have really good powers of deduction or observational skills, so I'm going to be checking in with them. And if they pass a roll, I'll be like, hey, while they are fighting, you notice.
Mm.
And that gives them the opportunity. So, knowing your character's sheets, your player sheets, um, and finding ways to not only leverage attributes and characteristics, but also skills that help define that character and making sure that's part of your narrative.
Yeah, I mean, I even take that a step further, and I will at various points during if I'm running a long Call of Cthulhu campaign, once in session 0, and then at some point, maybe 2/3, maybe a halfway, I will say, hey, character X, what are 2 skills that you want to make sure come into play? And they'll say, I would love to get lock picking in there and, something else. I'm like, all right, those will definitely show up, and that's to your point, that's knowing your sheet, but it's also, let your players tell you what they want to do and give, session 0, as we've talked about many times, but session 0 is a chance to make sure everybody is playing the game they want to play, and is playing the same game.
Yeah, and I use something in my games called a player bid. And if anyone's watched Clockwork Vines, they've seen me do it. And it says, for this particular challenge, for this particular event, you tell me something from the sheet that you would like to use that will help you meet or beat this particular challenge. And then we're going to roll for it. And if you succeed, hey. And if you don't succeed, then I get to have some fun with describing how this impacts this part of the story. So I get a lot of player input, um, And yeah, that's how I start. I know my players, I know my sheets, and I'm checking in before game and after game every session.
Yeah, that communication, both before and during and after the game, it really shows when you watch the game just how smoothly, everybody, there's a, God, I'm using the word community too much, but the table is kind of all leaning forward together. They're all in the same headspace, and you can tell that. You can feel that. One of something I struggle with in Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu is probably my game of choice for various reasons. I think the system makes sense to people. If I tell you you have a 60% chance to make that jump in your head, that makes sense. As opposed to saying, well, your challenge rating is 18 and your skill, like just whatever, or build a dice pool, whatever, just you gotta 2/3 of the time you're gonna do this. Just makes sense to people. So that's nice. But one of the things I struggle with is the sanity mechanic. Uh, and I mean, you have some interesting ways of kind of, I won't say ignoring it, but of bypassing it, and I mean, I have my own thoughts, but let's talk a little bit at the sanity mechanic. What talk about how you use that in Clockwork Vines.
So I will preface that by saying I have run Call of Cthulhu with the sanity mechanic, especially if I am on a public stream and we are using source material, like when I ran Harlem Unbound for Roll20 Con. I was really nervous at that point because, again, sanity mechanic is something I understand, but I am the storyteller, which means my characters give me input in how they would like the story to go right, left, up, or down, but their characters are who they have created and they know their characters best. I can't be in their characters' minds. So a lot of times, if I cannot remove the sanity mechanic, and again, I understand that every game system has been created with certain mechanics for a very specific reason, and I can respect that. But as someone who is not a mental health professional or a psychic, I always tell my players, I can't tell you that this event would have an impact on your character's psyche like that. Only you know it. Mm-hmm. So if we do have the sanity mechanic, I let them tell me I'm going to make a sanity roll right now because my character is freaking out, and we'll go accordingly. But for me, when I sat down and really considered, could I call myself running a Call of Cthulhu game if it doesn't have the sanity mechanic, because that is something that it's notorious for? And I said, a lot of people who sit down with Call of Cthulhu are into horror, and this make people chuckle. Horror is my least favorite genre ever. I never ran a Call of Cthulhu because I love horror.
Right.
I liked the system, and it never dawned on me to make that connection. Call of Cthulhu out of the box, and I had explained to someone, is usually tell the story of how much of the unsettling reality of the unknown and looking into the void and being exposed to that can the human psyche take before it breaks. Whereas I looked at the system and I said, how does the unsettling reality of the unexpected challenge humanity to be innovative and resilient? And if you look at it from that approach, that's not something that negatively impacts the sanity. That is something that challenges a character to be like, I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to go ahead and roll luck and see what happens, and then react accordingly. So that made me relax a lot. And so I removed the sanity mechanic because it's basically a role play supplement. How shaken up, how impacted has my character been emotionally? People can role play that out. I don't need to keep track of that. And if a person is tired of playing a character, or they no longer have or get enjoyment out of playing a character because of where their story has gone, then they can communicate that and we can make a new character without it having to be tied to now we're telling a story of people who can take no more.
Mm.
So,
That's a really
yeah.
nice point. Yeah, because so much of the, kind of the I don't know, the street cred of Call of Cthulhu is just like you get beat down and you get beat down and then you break,
Mhm.
and thinking about it the other way of just, you've kind of your story arc is through, and you're kind of now you want to move transition.
Yeah. Because it always amazed me that a lot of people don't pay attention to. There's a lot of things that do a lot of damage in Call of Cthulhu, weapons, attacks, arcane objects, and so on. But the investigators really don't have that many HP, which is kind of resembles real life in such a crazy way. If somebody takes an axe or a dagger to the leg, like that's hurting. Like that's
It's
not.
gonna hurt for a while.
So yeah, we did not use the sanity mechanic in Clockwork Vines, but not because I think it's good, bad, should be used or shouldn't. It's just it wasn't relevant to the story that I was endeavoring to tell, and it's not a mechanic that, as a storyteller, I personally have had experience with it adding or taking away from anything I was running.
Yeah, I got to admit, as written, it's pretty reductive. And, to your point of not being a mental health professional, I don't think mental health professionals were involved in the crafting of it. And so, for me, it's about being mindful of folks who do have these who do struggle with these issues. And especially if I'm running a con game or something, and I'm like, haha, you're depressed, and the person has depression,
Yeah.
like that's got. And so I kind of personally, I just shorthand it to the old fight, flight, or freeze. And if you fail a sanity roll, if you get to the point where you break, those are your three choices. Um and it still, gives some interesting story bits, but it takes away the kind of possibility of let's all point and laugh at the person who, is different because of, something that, as we've, the game was written in the 80s, and in some ways you can tell, like I think the sanity mechanic is a big way you can tell, because in the 80s we weren't as sensitive about, or we weren't as aware of how many people struggle with mental health issues, and how wide that spectrum is. Some people have very mild, but they're still having anxiety. Some people have more serious bouts, and we don't know why. And that is not something that I want to mock, is the wrong word, but it's kind of what we're doing.
Mhm.
When you're doing that. It's similar to, you talked about Harlem Unbound, which is, I think, one of the best RPG supplements ever written. And that chapter, there's a chapter in that book about running race at the table that every GM should read, because it's all too often, um, race in games is like the sanity mechanic. It's there to it's not there to serve the story. It's there as either something that is being totemized in either a positive or negative way, or it's something that is, I don't know, there are weird issues that you need to work out or something like that. And so, um, what was your experience like running Harlem and Bound?
Initially, a lot of nerves because I tend to pick up the mechanics of a system and then tell a lot of original stories. And I was fortunate because I was able to say, I'm still going to tell an original story so that if anyone is going to play Harlem Unbound, I haven't spoiled the included adventures. So I relaxed a little bit there. Um, with settings like Harlem Unbound, a lot of people go in fearful because they're like, well, it's set this time, so we have to play these specific types of characters. But at my table, I had people who were Asian and people who were Black. And we had people creating characters with Chinese origins, characters with Indian origins, characters that were local, and characters that were from a different region of the United States at that time. And it even allowed some of my players to do research about what people from their specific ethnic group historically were doing at that time and learn things that they had no idea about or hadn't heard about before doing research to try to create a character for this game. So I really enjoyed how I created a story where the theme was spice of life, and there was so much if you equate diversity to seasoning, just so many diverse seasonings in that particular mix of cast and background and so on, that even though it was a one shot, it was an amazing experience.
I think that one's online too, right? People
Yes,
can, yeah, it's you can find that. I think it's on YouTube, as I
it
recall.
is.
Yeah,
Harlem Unbound,
yeah.
Roll20Con.
Uh, 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 it was awesome. I mean, so it's interesting. You don't like horror, and yet all of your Cthulhu stuff is stories you've written. And I mean, I'm going to say Clockwork Vines had some moments that felt like horror.
And I think that really sometimes it surprises me when people are like, I have a good friend, Omega, and he and they often just say, "No, ma'am, no, ma'am," and I'm just like, that I am a poet, so I think a lot of times the imagery and the descriptions that I give, they not only have layers of allegory in them, but they have layers of representing various themes. So whether the theme is avarice or if the theme is sorrow and so on, I'm not thinking I'm making a sentient bush that's in the shape of a person that's going to scare someone. For me, that foliage that is mimicking people around it is representing the narrative struggle of man against themselves. Well, whether it's man against themselves, man against nature, man against greed, man against gods. I find so much enjoyment telling the stories that aren't just man against man, or man against we're trying to find the big bad and destroy it. That concept doesn't horrify me. And I also realize every person is going to experience it in a different way, and I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I always joke like I'm not going to scare you. Like it's just not going to happen because we're if we're sitting at a table to con, if we're sitting on computers, whatever, I can write the scariest scene possible. I'm not going to scare you, but the trick is the players know what scares their characters.
Right.
And that's that all I find too often GMs are trying to scare the players, not the characters. And that's a key difference to me. Like the only game that I think can really truly scare people is Dread. I don't know. Have you ever played Dread? It is terrifying.
And again, I think it's the fear of the unknown versus fear of the unexpected. When you roll a dice and there is, you don't know what's going to happen. With games like Dread, or for settings like that, or like an average Call of Cthulhu game that's, if you just take it directly from the book, the unexpected is a given with the dice, but it's the unknown. This has happened, or I have witnessed this, or this has entered into my life, and I have no idea, like mentally, physically, psychologically, what it actually means. It's like staring into a void, and I think that as humans, that is so unsettling that we recoil from that experience. When it's just, I don't know if it's going to be heads or tails, I think there's a little bit more levity in that approach.
How much are you talking with your players sort of about what what that, like that void moment that you're talking about there, like how much do you prep them saying, like, probably next session you're going to have this, there's going to come a moment, or is it, you're counting on their improv?
It goes back to, and I have a feeling that anyone that is a responsible storyteller mentions the session zero. Before we even get to a session zero, as soon as someone has applied to play a game with me, we have our lines and fails. And as a DM, I also have my lines and fails. And the second component I have is we always discuss, and for anybody who is sensitive about this, I am about to talk about death for about 2 or 3 minutes. So feel free to mute it if you need to. But we have a frank conversation about death. I have never ran a campaign where the focus or there's a threat to it, but it's always the unexpected. And I always say this: if a character has come to me and says, if a player has come to me and says, I want to kill my character off, I want them to go, first of all, we're going to have a long conversation about why does it need to be this way. But if this is what they have decided to do, every one of my tables gets asked, if someone has planned for an exit, be it a violent exit or a calm exit or whatever it may be, would you rather know ahead of time? Or are you okay with it happening on screen, so to speak? Because sometimes, based on what people are dealing with in their personal lives or things that have happened in their lives, period, being faced with, oh, someone, I have a first aid kit, I want to try to help them, or oh, they're upset and they're walking out the room, I want to try to convince them to stay. People get very, very emotional in those moments, and I have noticed that is where the biggest emotional upset comes in, not being able to stop it. Sometimes they exhaust all options, and it's heartbreaking as a storyteller, because I know that the player who plays his character has made this decision, so it's not going to be reversed.
Yeah, that is a tough. That's a great thing that I have never thought of, asking players, do you want to know beforehand or not? Because I think you're right. There have definitely been times when the players are like, no, what? Stop. We can do, and I don't want to, as a GM, completely pull everything out and go, look, he wants to leave, like that's not fun for anybody, but sometimes it's necessary. Yeah.
So outside of that, though, because I know the lines and veils, because we have our safety tools being used behind the scenes constantly, and I'm checking in with people, I don't usually have to warn anybody about those type of events, because they tend to have more of the experience of the wait, what, than the oh no.
Right.
And that is always my intention. I want you to know that the rock that you picked up 2 sessions ago actually may be the key to facing this new thing. So
we talk a lot. I've talked a lot with a lot of different GMs about safety tools, and I mean, look, if you're not using safety tools, I don't know what you're doing. It's they are, even, I even use them in my home game, because even though we're people who've played together forever, and we, I don't think we could cross lines with each other. It's still good to have them down there, it's responsibility. It's responsibility to each other, and it goes back to that, making sure you all are playing the same game, and you all want to play that game. And it's not just safety stuff. I was talking today with a friend who was like, I'm going to run this game, and they're going to have 5 minutes to figure out a puzzle. And if they don't figure out the puzzle, it's going to be a fight. And I'm like, are the players figuring out the puzzle or are the characters figuring out the puzzle? Because, you want to check with, make sure the players like puzzles if you're going to do this, because that can be super frustrating. If it's a puzzle, if I have to do a Rubik's Cube or we're getting in a fight, let's just start the fight because I'm not going to do the Rubik's Cube. Let's just, and as a player, that's not fun for me. But you can do puzzles as my buddy Bill Lee, who was on this show. He ran a game, an Indiana Jones Cthulhu game, where we were all playing, Indy and all those people, and the puzzles were all based on our skills. And so, we go through this puzzle, and it's like, well, I made the roll, so of course that the Templar sword should point to the west. Things that I would never know. And it wasn't. It made the puzzles fun and an engaging part of the game without making it I have to know the chemical composition of salt to do this puzzle, something like that. But that's an example of session 0 or at a con game saying like, here's how we're going to do this. Where, if your players don't like puzzles, don't put a lot of puzzles in the game because everybody's just going to get frustrated.
Correct, and I think because we're playing a TTRPG, that there is a certain level of, if you're going to put puzzles in there, and I put a lot of puzzles in my games, but not that the players necessarily always have to figure out, unless I know the players are going to enjoy that challenge. For example, when I did my All Bard campaign, and everything in that campaign is musical themes. The creatures that I created, the big bads, and they had a escape room like situation, and the solution to getting out there of that room was a music theory situation. And I was playing with various musical artists, or I call them real life bards, whether they're writers or so on. And they enjoyed the experience. They yelled at me about why would you use bass clef, but it was all it was
battle ends and down goes Charles. Oh, fudge.
It's a whole thing. So you can find enjoyment in inside jokes that are created from the familiarity and comfort level of the people that you're playing with. Yeah.
Wait a minute, bass clef, face, FACE, yeah. Right? All right, there we go. Pulled that from 30 years ago. Jeez Louise. Yeah, I think that's a great note of, that's knowing your table, but also you had conversations with those players beforehand, and there were relationships there. So do you run games not online, or are all your games online?
Right now they are, because of the nature of everything. Yeah. I had just started to run them at conventions, like Comic Palooza and so on. And I had a regular in-person RuneQuest game that I was running for people.
Love RuneQuest.
And these are a group of people who had never played before, and this is why I say it's rarely the system. Now, I will put a caveat. Systems that are super crunchy, that's difficult for everyone. But when it comes to introducing people to playing TTRPGs, it's the experience that seems to be far more important than, is it the right system? Are they going to like it? Or are they not going to like it? I started out with just basic role play system. I had created this. Everyone has amnesia, and part of their first session was them rolling for their stats, and I made it part of the role play. They didn't know who they were and so on, and there was like a computer voice saying, testing out strength limits, and they were rolling as they went on. Then we took a break, and I filled out some stuff on their sheet, and we started playing. That didn't work for that group of people, not because it was too complicated, but because they really didn't connect with the characters that they had created. So I stopped like 3 sessions in, and the next week I brought something completely different. I brought out RuneQuest. I had all the sheets, and I said, let's try something new. And then ended up being one of the best campaigns I ever ran. So having those conversations, reading the air, and also being able to pick up on signs and people really don't want to disappoint you the same way you don't want to disappoint your players. Um, if no one's laughing or enjoying themselves, why not change it up and say, hey, let's try something different?
Yeah, I think that's a great note, and it's something that home games
Mm-hmm.
especially, like uh uh if people aren't having fun, do some, be okay with saying, all right, let's do something else. Don't don't get so caught up in I've got to run Ravenloft because
Mm-hmm.
it's Ravenloft. If the players aren't feeling it, find out what they do want to do
Yeah.
and do that, or make Ravenloft what they want. If they want slapstick comedy, a I'm the right GM for that, and b Ravenloft now, Strahd's gonna step on a banana. Like that's what's gonna happen. Um and it's okay to do that. Like none of this stuff is none of this stuff is War and Peace. This is not great literature. Take whatever you're playing and make it your own. Put your voice into it. Don't just like read right out of the book, because that's not gonna, nobody's gonna enjoy that. It's gonna, make it your own and make it what your players want to play. That's really interesting that you so running con games is a totally different world than running. It's a little bit more like running games online. um
Yes.
but it's a hold. Like the weird thing about con games and running games online is you have to have the clock in your head,
Mm-hmm.
because this game is 4 hours, and so by hour three this has to have happened, and you have to like time things out. um do you how do you kind of do that more by flow, or do you kind of time things out in your head? How do you?
I know my limits. I know that I cannot run a game longer than 2.5 to 3 hours without needing a break. So when you reserve your sessions or you volunteer for a specific session, I know that I can run a successful one shot in 3 hours, regardless of the decisions that people make. I do not overcommit in my notes, and this is something, if someone is running source material things and they've been given a specific adventure they have to run, I think that's a little bit different. If you're creating an adventure to run at a con and you have that flexibility, I always do an outline. This is the introduction. This is, the crescendo, so to speak, where everything kind of peaks, and then this is where I would like to wrap it up. That's the beginning, a middle, and end. By the first hour, everybody should be introduced. By the second hour, the journey, the getting to the actual place, the meat happens. And then that third hour, we are heading towards our climax to end everything up and to wrap everything up, not end everything up. Well, sometimes things end up in different ways, but still, we're wrapping everything up, and I make sure that I have at least 10 minutes at the end where people can do their epilogues, especially in a one shot where we're wrapping it up.
I love
Um,
epilogues. I think epilogues. I love. I don't know if you've ever played Fiasco, but one of the bits of Fiasco is that at the end of the game, everybody has like these. You spent the whole game gaining these little chips.
mhm.
And you give them back, and that's your epilogue, and it's like a step in your epilogue, and so the epilogue is kind of this tiered thing. But I love to like do an epilogue that's like years later, just to see like what has happened with these characters, like that sort of.
So I do, when I wrap up stream sessions and also when I play them in person, I let, again, to your point earlier about everyone getting screen time, everybody gives like their mental monologue or a brief epilogue of what's going on in their characters' minds or what they're planning on doing or where they are in any type of emotional or physical state. And then they do their outro and say, I'm this person, you can find me here. That allows, I think, a neat closure to every chapter of a story. Um, and it also gives you, as the DM, some additional material to work on. Um, in the week between, because you're like, okay, this person's planning to go shopping and do X, Y, and Z, so let me make sure I put a little pocket of time here. A nice little cameo from an NPC would be great here because they need to be cheered up. And that helps me check in to the characters' mindset and how the characters are doing. And then once the stream ends, I can check in on my players and see how they're doing.
That's a really nice point. When you're running a long running game, you know, doing small epilogues at the end of every, the end of every episode thing is kind of a milestone. I mean, every once in a while you end at a cliffhanger or something like that, but and so having those epilogues can kind of tie a bow on, on an episode like that. I really like that. I hadn't thought of, I had only considered epilogues for like, this is the end, but like small epilogues are a great idea. Wow. I'm taking that away from today. So we talked a little bit about Embrace the Initiative, which is something you created to, I'm going to totally misrepresent. You know what? I'm not going to misrepresent it. Tell us about Embrace the Initiative. That's the better way to do this.
Embrace the Initiative is a workshop for new or existing DMs or storytellers who want to become more confident and comfortable in their particular communities and spaces. It is started out very heavily focused towards a group of marginalized individuals who were nervous or uncertain about DMing for the first time. By the time I got enough feedback and interest in it, I just sort of opened it. I said, whether you're new to it or not, we're not going to really spend a lot of time talking about the mechanics of a specific system. You can get a rule book. We're going to be talking about the heart and mind needed, or the heart and mind that can be helpful when you are creating a community, building your table, and being not only a responsible but a truly caring storyteller. So it became Embrace the Initiative. I ran it at, I think I've run it at 2 or 3 cons now. I go through all the basic embrace, spell something out, and if anyone is curious, you can always, I'll share some stuff on my Twitter about it, but there's an EMBRACE, and each one of those is a what I call element to being a good with things like every time is your first time, or be the DM or GM that you would want to play for, and those type of things. And I just go through like a quick PowerPoint of examples, and with each letter people roll their dice, and they've got this little stat block on their handout, and they fill it out. And then after about 30 minutes, because I really don't want to be talking that long, we let people get a 3 to 5 minute opportunity to DM for the other people in the workshop, and they use those stats to roll. And I've got like a random list of settings or circumstances or end goals, and I set the timer, and for some people it's the first time they've ever DM'd, and for other people it's the chance for them to play around with new ideas. And it's just a really wholesome, enlightening for me every time, because there's questions, some things that never been asked before, stories or situations about, hey, I belong to a PTSD a therapy group, and we started a TTRPG club, and our DM has left, and now I'm the one who's volunteered to step up, so I'm here to take notes and learn what I can so that I can better run this particular group. And lots of different things that touch your heart. I ran one, and there was like a 13-year-old there, and he was like, am I allowed? I was like, sure, come on in. And that's Embrace the Initiative.
I love the idea of recognizing that there are communities that are underrepresented in the world of not just GMing but gaming. And but then you take, okay, they're underrepresented in the world of gaming, they're even more underrepresented in the world of GMing. And so something like Embrace the Initiative is a great way to start to give a toolkit to folks who don't have the experience or haven't had the opportunities, that other people have had, to kind of enter into this space in a really safe and I mean, constructive way. I think that sort of the framework that you have is a really nice way to make it non-threatening, because sometimes it can be a little daunting when you're like, okay, now do it, and that's just not how we're going to build the next generation of great storytellers. I think it's great. I think I'm hoping that once the world is not a hellscape, if that ever does indeed happen, I want to get you out to Big Bad Con, which is our local con here, a darn fine RPG con, I will say. And to the credit of the folks who run the RPGs there, possibly the most inclusive gaming con around. And tons of great names involved and that sort of thing. But I think something like Embrace the Initiative would be wonderful there. So Sean, if you're listening, get Honey on the Kickstarter goal, the stretch goals for the next Kickstarter for Big Bad Con. And I mean, one of the things that you do that I think is not unique, but I find really wonderful, is you use role-playing games as to lift up people. You use role-playing games to raise funds. You use role-playing games to highlight issues, and I think it's something that is super important, because as a GM in a stream, you have a voice, and you have an audience. And I'm keenly aware, even on my rinky-dink little stream, I always want to bring up, if during if it's I want to highlight other voices that are doing great things and lift up those voices and tell, hey, 10 people watching me do this, here's somebody else doing something awesome, go check them out. And you take that a step further, where you're actually raising funds for great organizations, stuff like that. So how'd you get started in that?
I have been heavily invested in charity work even since, from a very, very young age. Being taken directly to different shelters and so on, and being exposed to the fact that while there's amazing things that happen in this world, there are also unfortunate things that happen in this world. And like I always tell people, my goal in life is to not only leave the table a better place than when I found it, but that I can translate to the world. And that can be done in such little ways, things that seem so tiny, but make a difference to people's lives. So from volunteering from a young age, whether it's doing readathons to raise money for things, and dealing with trauma through giving, a lot of things that have happened to me that have been super traumatic, I have channeled that energy into finding something charitable to do for other people in my similar situation. And I've really done what I could to use whatever platform available to me to do that. So when I began my quote unquote streaming career, TTRPG streaming career, it was for a charity stream. I had never played D&D before. I'd been playing other things. I knew of it, but it wasn't a system that I ever really looked into, because there was so much lore, and I am not a lore person.
Yeah.
But I got the invite to participate in Extra Life charity stream. And then after that, when the Uncaged anthology was published and they did their first large charity stream, kind of actual play, I got invited. I signed up not knowing how big that was really going to be. And then they haven't let go of me since. So my TTRPG public online career, so to speak, started at the charity space, and I never forget what I got into it to do. Which, yes, I love telling stories with people, but I also wanted to reach the people who are homebound, the people who have a difficult time navigating spaces and places because they don't make them accessible. Uh, Giving people a platform, a voice, a screen to be seen. Because I do a lot of disability advocacy and medical challenge work and so on. So, because that is the roots of why I started to do things more publicly online, it's just carried from it. It's been a platform where, as long as I have the opportunity to give back, I I personally feel like I am succeeding.
Yeah, I think, and it's not just, it doesn't have to just be monetarily, although I'll tell you, as someone who has worked in the nonprofit world for most of my life, 9 times out of 10, you giving somebody money is like the best thing you can do for them. Like you can give them all of the attention and stuff you want, but the donation is really going to be the thing that makes the difference. But it doesn't have to be monetarily. Um, you can do things that are community based. You can, you could do a beach cleanup. You could do, you can raise awareness about local issues or national issues, because, when you're streaming, it's not just people who live down the street from you. Who knows where, somebody from the Czech Republic might be in there, but you can, you have a voice, and it's incumbent on each of us to use that voice, and that's something that you do really well, and something I really appreciate. Like, how, like, somebody's just starting their streaming stuff and they want to like do more something charitable. um I mean, part of it is building a relationship. If you're going to do a donation kind of thing, you need to build a relationship with that nonprofit that you're going to do the donation for. Sometimes that's a systemic thing, like Extra Life, that's kind of baked in already. There's the infrastructure there. But if you're going to do something with like a local food bank or something like that, you want to have kind of already have a relationship there. But so, like, what are some of your recommendations for people if they want to get started in sort of doing some gaming philanthropy?
First of all, you actually have to care. It has to be something that touches your heart, something that you're passionate about. Because passion without purpose is pointless. So you can talk passionately about something and be passionate about something, but when it comes to getting the opportunity to actually make a difference, people have a tendency to compare. They see somebody has racked in $10,000 or somebody has racked in this or that, and they're like, I could never do that. I'm going to be completely honest. Since I was about 12 or 13, I've gotten involved in larger charity events by just picking up the phone, calling the charity or the representative, and asking, "What do you need?"
Yep.
Um,
That's
there are,
but that's building the relationship. That is.
and it can be something as simple as, "Hey, I would like to give back to some local shelters. I know that it's important." Looking them up, get their number, find who's the volunteer coordinator, and so on, and be like, hey, I'm a streamer, or hey, I'm a gamer, and I'm about to raise some money, and I'd like to donate it to your chapter, or I would like to buy some items to donate to your chapter. I see what you have on your website. Is that what currently you actually need, or do you have some things or some needs that you haven't stated? And 8 times out of 10, I'm going to be completely honest. I keep saying completely honest because honest is on my brain because I've been looking at baby supplies. Um, but
I just thought you
I
were lying for the rest of it.
no,
Now you're being honest.
I personally always call and ask what people need because oftentimes it's something as simple as laundry detergent or towels, and they may have extensive lists. You can donate t-shirts and shoes and whatever on their website, but at this moment, right now, this is what their actual need is. So it's find the cause that you're passionate about, find an organization that is helping to alleviate, relieve, or advocate for that particular cause. Pick up the phone or write an email, letting them know how you would like to contribute or asking how you can contribute. Be responsible, be accountable, and be considerate.
Mm.
So if you say you're going to raise some money for a particular cause, it doesn't matter if it's $50, it doesn't matter if it's $100 or if you get to $500. Have a system of accountability in place for yourself so that you can not only prove it to the organization when you make your donation, but be willing to prove it to your followers or the people who have given, so that you can build the reputation within your community as being reputable, being trustworthy, and being willing to be that voice for whatever it is you're passionate about.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And you just proved you're a poet. Just that passion without purpose is pointless. That's that's a beautiful phrase. That's a. I want to say I love you have. And now this is just fanboyism, and I want to apologize for this, but you have your catchphrase is one of my favorite things. So just walk me through "Love Your You."
I started doing hashtag love your you because that was a personal breakthrough that allowed me the mental freedom to know my value, know my worth, and know that I have something to give back to the community. A lot of people are hesitant to get involved in communities because they're like, what can I contribute? There's already so many people doing all these things. And it starts with you, but it also is a reminder that that is not an easy thing. So when I say, remember to love your you, and then say, if that's hard today, it's okay. Because it can be hard. And if you build the right type of community and you surround yourself by people who are genuinely kind, and if you're genuinely kind, you oftentimes attract kind people. And I'm not talking about nice. I know I say this a lot on social media. There's a difference between kindness and niceness. A kind person sees someone who's thirsty or needs some water, they go get them a water bottle, and here you go. They may not be the nicest person. They may be like, here, and walk off. But it's the kindness in their heart that saw a need and they went to fill that need.
Mm.
A nice person may see the person that is thirsty, may be like, oh, I'm so sad, that is so awful, I'm so sorry you don't have water. They may even get on social media and talk about how they saw someone today that was thirsty. But it's kindness that drives you to action. So learning to be kind to yourself and love yourself gives you the ability to extend that to others. And vice versa, learning to extend that to others and give and see that people can be kind and see that people do care about you can help you on your own journey to learning to love yourself.
Yeah, it's so for me it's fascinating because it wasn't until relatively late in my life that I became aware that that people struggled with that, because I one of the 87 kinds of privilege I have is that I have always had probably unearned self-worth, self-worth and just love of myself. And, learning and having people that I care about in my life who don't have that same thing has really made Love Your You resonate with me. And it went from being something that in my mind I'm like, well, that's self-evident, to being something that I wish other people, I want to be the mirror. And I think what you really do is you're the mirror that shows other people how awesome their you is. And I really respect that. And I think it's we can run the best game we've ever run, and it's not going to be half as important as something like Love Your You, which is having an impact in the best possible way.
I certainly hope so, because it's what I bring to my table. I always say in social media, the spiciest take you're ever going to see from me is me talking about jalapenos or like a curry, because you have so many people out there on the proverbial front lines, being the voices, being the people in the fights, to be heard, to be seen, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And I want to be the medic tent that people can come to my socials or my website and whatever and recover, have a nice meal, read something that might make them chuckle, get reminded that they're doing a wonderful job before they go back out there and face the variety of different challenges that is out there. So that's why I do it. I want to be a comfort. I want to be a place of peace, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that is honestly one of the reasons that I gravitated to your presence. Is it's just a little oasis of calm in the weird world that we have to deal with. But something you said there I think is super important, and that is, the struggle to be heard. I know it's really easy, especially in the streaming world, to only look at how many people saw that, and oh my God, my viewer numbers are terrible. Think about why you're doing what you're doing, and doing it just to be seen is not really a great reason to do it. If you don't love what you're doing, people aren't going to watch it. That passion, that goes back to your passion thing, where if you love what you're doing and you believe in what you're doing and you're having fun doing what you're doing, that's what you need. That's going to give you everything you need. And if only 7 people see it, well, those 7 people just saw something awesome. And what more do you need? Well, you have been so gracious with your time. We end every episode with the same question. So what is your favorite system to run?
Basic roleplay.
I'm a fan. I call it the lingua franca, because just everybody understands it. It just clicks. What's a system you haven't run that you would love to run?
Kids on Bikes.
Oh, it's fun. I've not run it. I've played it. And all right, the last one, the Space Jam question. Honey, Martians have invaded the Earth, and they are going to destroy our planet, the place where I keep all my stuff, unless you run an awesome game for them. So what are you running for those Martians?
I am probably running one of my own systems called Hope and Happenstance. And that's simply because the character creation process is very simple. 3 items and 3 skills, and you pass it along. Each person runs one, so everyone has their sheets. And they tell me the setting, and they tell me the time period that they want their story to take place in. And either we use a deck of cards or a Jenga tower, which is very close to Dread in the pools, in a set of dice. You can choose to pool, or you can choose to roll the dice. And we'll tell a good story together. I'll learn some things about their people, and they'll learn some things about our people. And hopefully at the end, we're laughing, smiling, or have enjoyed enough about each other that the thoughts of destruction fritter away.
That is an awesome answer. Thank you so much. You can we went to Zoom, not StreamYard, so I don't have the little thing rolling at the bottom, but you can find Honey on, tell people where they can find you. Let's do it that way.
You can find me on Twitter at Honey and Dice. You can find me at www.honeyanddice.com, and all of my schedules, my appearances, everything official and administrative is kept there. You can find me on Instagram at Honey and Dice. There's nothing there. I just didn't want someone to take the name. And that's where you can.
That's really the best way to use Instagram, honestly. I think my Instagram is pictures of my cat and pictures of board games I play. I think that's 100% what I have on there. Well, this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining us and for being part of this. Folks, if you get a chance, go watch Clockwork Vines. You can find it on YouTube. It's outstanding. They're the 2 seasons, especially GM's. I think the 2 tables part of it is really interesting and is something to watch how she manages, especially when the tables come together. There's a whole thing, and it's awesome. Honey, thank you for helping keep the game moving.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now I have to push the stop recording button. There we go.